Well, Cal, I gotta say, I love Manchester. I'm here. I'm back in Manchester. This is my third time since I've been in this country, but for a test match, it's very, very cool. So I don't know about you, but I'm happy. You're back in Adelaide.
I am
Good.
in Adelaide, but really enjoying watching some of this cricket. It's enthralling, this series so far. Certainly, England copped a decent whack in that first test. It's just did Bazball get put back in its box? Well, they've bounced back really well, haven't they? Oh no, I'm not allowed to mention Bazball, am
Cal, the first rule of Bazball is you're not allowed to talk about Bazball.
I?
Ah, okay, on that note, we'll probably talk about Bazball, but let's get on with the show.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Timed Out. I am joined by Callum Ferguson, as always, doing our trans side of the world, whatever it is, a chat as we do. I'm in Manchester. I've been watching the Test series all the way through. It's been quite a fascinating one. It swung one way and then it swung the other way. Just wondering what you've made of it. We saw. I guess we've got two sides that have batting lineups that aren't always necessarily reliable and two very good bowling attacks, Cal.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that first test certainly was, probably a real knock back into place, I suppose, for the style of cricket that they're playing now, England. And you've got to stick fat, I think, if you make that decision. So, I'm hopeful that they'll stick with it. And certainly, there were signs in that evening's play yesterday that Johnny Bairstow's not going to take a backward step. Zach Crawley was pretty keen to dig in. He's probably been a little more lean than some of the other players in that top order, so it's good to see him still there. But that first test, certainly, the English batters were under the pump for the majority of the time, and South Africa bowled beautifully, and batted well too. They certainly did what they said they were going to do. They were going to stick to their game plan. They weren't going to get sucked in, and that was led from the front by their captain, Dean Elgar, no doubt. But it's been an enthralling series so far, and England on top in the second test.
You mentioned Zach Crawley, so I've been doing my usual net stalking, and that a few people picked up on this. I should have kept it secret and not told them, but part of the new regime means that Brendan McCullum has a playlist and a boombox and plays it during the nets, and it's like proper. Honestly, it's like smooth FM retro kind of
Right.
radio station stuff.
Wow.
Australian fans will be happy to know that Natalie Imbruglia makes it there with Torn, and John Farnham, who has obviously been going through health problems, he's on there with Two Strong Hearts. So
Good.
my favourite bit with Zach Crawley, though, was first thing I filmed, and I did post this yesterday. He was absolutely cleaned up by the ageless Jimmy Anderson. Cleaned up. That stump's not flying. And the song that was playing at the time was Foreigners, I Want to Know What Love Is. And
Goodness me.
Oh, no, it was such a mournful sort of moment. So it was very funny. I guess, it has turned around. We're about to sort of find out. One thing that I wanted to ask you about, see if you can solve the mystery for me, because I confess I just don't understand what it's about. And so England bowled South Africa out, for 150. So it's pretty hard to criticize anything about a bowling performance that gets rid of a side in 150 with 150 runs. This bowling short at the tail, and it's not just about bowling one or two short balls. It's about consistently just bowling short the whole time. I don't understand what it's meant to achieve, because conventional wisdom, right, is that you bowl some short balls to rattle the tail enders, people who have average 10 or 11.
Yes.
And then you basically knock their stumps over. Do you have any, what are your thoughts about the way that England are just sticking to the short ball after short ball after short ball?
Yeah, look, I think initially what will happen in that scenario is that they'll try to rattle the lower order and effectively bowl short to try to get them sitting back and then expose them at the fuller length. What can happen is if the lower order players start swinging quite hard at some of these balls and they get away with a few, then that then loses a bit of its edge, because if they get away with a few and then they pitch up and get a hold of one when they bowl the fuller length, then it's almost like they get that feeling of invincibility, and they'll just start clearing the front leg out the way and swinging at everything. Now, lower order players can make things tricky because they hit at unconventional areas. So if you get too stuck taking the stumps out of play, they start feeling like they've just got a free hit every ball. So it's a really tricky one. I think you've got to try as much as possible to hold your length, hit the top of the off stump as much as possible. That's why they're batting in the lower order. They don't like good bowling. So I think the odd short, you've got to, as much as possible, just bowl at them as if they're top order players, and inevitably you'll get the result you're looking for. But there is the odd occasion where you get a talented striker of the ball in the lower order, and Rabada is that. He's got some ability to find the middle of the bat. So it does cause a few headaches, but what you need to be as a fast bowler is really clear on what your plan is when things start going that way, because it isn't something you come across regularly, but it can be something that can rattle a bowling attack if you're not properly prepared. And I think that England now have had a few moments where that line of attack hasn't worked. Australia certainly have. We've seen it against India, where they just got stuck bowling back of a length and short, trying to rattle the Indians at the Gabba. And once they started to get their eye in at that length, it became really difficult for them. So, look, in my opinion, what I've seen work forever and a day is just holding your length and bowling at them like they're a top order, and inevitably you get the result. But you've got to understand that a lot of these lower order hitters are extremely talented. They're not just bunnies these days. They're all doing a lot of work on their batting. So I'm just not of the opinion that bowling short and trying to intimidate a batting lower order is the way to go too often, unless you've got a guy bowling 155 like Shoaib Akhtar.
Well, yeah, that'd probably work anyway. But
it's a bit different.
Yeah, run and hide.
Yep.
I think Ngidi played the prettiest shot of a day, which was one that was pitched up and he drove it down the ground. It was an absolutely glorious shot. Nortje has caused him a few problems. I think all but the wicket of Markram was basically England got while pitching it up. So I'm going to try and I want to get to the bottom of this. I just don't know if it's something really obvious that I'm missing, but I'll see if I can get to the bottom. I'll ask some questions anyway.
I'm sure they've got reasonings, and that's absolutely fine. There might be a trend for the lower order of South Africa that they don't like it short, but you've got to be pretty quick on your feet these days at international level. Everyone's working on their weaknesses and trying to get better.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite interesting. Could certainly say that. But other interesting things happening. Well, it is this Sunday going to be the long-awaited, I guess, something we've been talking about for a while, the draft for the BBL. And a few rumblings about that. Let's start first with Chris Lynn. So doesn't have a state contract, doesn't have a central contract. First, it was like, he still needed to get a non-objection certificate to go and play in the UAE, where he was offered big money, like everyone is being offered big money over there.
That's right.
But he has signed with the Strikers. So it sounds like there's been some real concessions made by Cricket Australia on this one, Cal.
Yeah, they have. And look, unfortunately, they're now in a position where they're almost, having to go the entirely other way to where they were probably 5-6 years ago, where they had too many overseas players of high quality trying to get a spot. They just couldn't fit them all in. These days, though, they're having to try to convince them. Things haven't gone the way that Cricket Australia thought they would with domestic T20 competitions around the world, and unfortunately, they found themselves a little bit behind the eight ball. So they're having to make some concessions in a lot of areas, and it's not just Chris Lynn, which, I think, we'll get onto this in a bit, but that's a huge signing for the Strikers for a number of reasons. But they're actually having to make a lot of concessions. You look at the David Warner situation, they're paying him mid 300,000 Australian dollars, to play 5 games, which is an astronomical figure compared to what we've been paying Big Bash players in the past, particularly local homegrown players. And it's probably what leads to the Steve Smith situation as well. I don't blame him, to be honest, for holding off on signing for the BBL with the Sydney Sixers because, to be honest, I reckon he was pretty put off by what happened last year. He was available, made himself available for the Sixers. Certainly wasn't asking anywhere near the amount that, what David Warner's going to get paid for his 5 games this year. He in turn was actually going to play for what I would believe is around 20,000 potentially as a replacement player, or 2,000 a game. So which is even less again.
Was the last year was the final what he was going to get, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I just find it really, it's swung big time. The power is clearly with the players now because Cricket Australia and the BBL have become desperate. So going back to Chris Lynn's situation, I mean, that is a huge signing for the Adelaide Strikers. They're getting a platinum player who's not obviously in the draft because he's a local player. He's going to play a lot more than some of these platinum overseas players that are going into the draft. Certainly playing a lot more than David Warner will be. And he's a local player, so they've still got the opportunity to take Rashid Khan with their retention card if they need to, player retention card. So, look, Strikers are going to end up with 2 of the best T20 players in world cricket landing on their doorstep in this off season. Obviously, Rashid having played there before, but this is a huge coup for the South Australian Cricket Association and the Adelaide Strikers, and they're shaping up as a real contender this year on those signings alone. So it's a really interesting landscape at the moment in the BBL, and certainly watch this space because I don't know that David Warner and Steve Smith situations going to be the last we hear of these short-term international Australian players. Will they or won't they play in the BBL scenarios? Because my understanding is that there might be a few others questioning whether it's worth their time when it's such a busy and packed schedule 12 months of the year.
Yeah, so just to highlight just how much this has turned around when you're talking about concessions and what they're having to do. Now, my understanding on very good authority was that the premium players, so, the players nominated themselves as gold, silver or bronze, and then Cricket Australia makes a decision on who is platinum. So my understanding is that you are more likely as a player to be given platinum status if you were staying for the whole season. So the more games you were available for, the more chance you were of being a platinum player. Now,
Okay.
So you look at, that's already a massive concession in itself, right? And some of the other players like Sam Billings has, I think, put his name in for the new South African T20 League as well as the Big Bash. So you've got players hedging their bets. And I just think that highlights itself how far Cricket Australia is, while they're going to be saying, this is great, more than 300 players have entered the draft, it's, more than we could have dreamed of or whatever. There's a real contradiction there in them picking it up, which they have to do for public relations reasons, and what they've actually had to concede behind the scenes. Huge concession, huge.
Yeah, the number of players signing up for the draft means nothing to me. It's all about the quality of players that land. So really, you need your first 50 or 60 players to be of high quality. Otherwise, it really just doesn't matter. You need the very best. Your top 20 overseas players need to be of very high notch. Otherwise, you've got to wonder whether it's actually got the pulling power anymore that it used to, the BBL. It used to be the number one T20 comp. from a player's perspective outside the IPL, and quite comfortably. It has slipped significantly because we are seeing players signing up for this draft, but not signing up for the business end of the tournament because they'll be heading elsewhere. And that's just not a situation I think Cricket Australia have been prepared for at all. In actual fact, they've probably led themselves down this path, which is probably the most disappointing part about all of it. It'll be a high-quality tournament. Everyone will love watching it. I'm a big fan of the BBL, but the fact of the matter is, at the moment, unless something drastic is done, it's a fading horse.
Which is sad to say. Just one final note. I did laugh because I have noticed on the list there are 2 players who have nominated who are from the UAE, which just made me laugh because they don't have to. They probably won't get a chance in their own tournament because they're fielding so many overseas players. Made me chuckle.
Unbelievable. Yeah, you got to laugh.
Let's just finish up. Of course, there is some cricket about to start in Australia. The Australian summer has started. Can you believe it or not? 25th of August, the international season. Yeah, kind of starting with these white ball games, first against Zimbabwe and then against New Zealand. Part of that, of course, building up to the T20 World Cup defence that Australia will be carrying out at home. And just refreshing to see cricket being played up in the north of Queensland again, getting cricket right up places like Townsville, also Zimbabwe over here. I don't know how often we're going to see them over in Australia. I don't think it's in the new FTP, but that's been a long time coming. And so kind of really nice to see them out here playing some white ball cricket.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, I've talked to you off air a little bit about how great it's been that the Indian cricket team have taken on Zimbabwe semi-regularly over the last 4 or 5 years. Well, it's great to see Zimbabwe back in Australia. It's been a while, and certainly it is great to see the northern parts of Australia being utilised, at this time of year where there is good cricket weather up there, and certainly it allows a bit more exposure to places like Townsville, where they've got fantastic cricket facilities up there, world class, and certainly they'll get exposed, and it'll be good to see potentially different styles of cricket played because the conditions are different up there, which is great. So we want to see that in Australia, and hearing what Marnus spoke about during the last few days about how he felt spin would play a huge part. That's great to hear from my point of view. I've talked about this with you, how, unfortunately spin hasn't played a huge part at times in Australian conditions. Well, up there in Townsville, there is a history of spin coming into the game. So that's enormously exciting, and I'm looking forward to watching the series, and hopefully Australia do the right thing and bump Zimbabwe. But we do know that Zimbabwe have had a history of troubling Australia from time to time. So, we'll all watch with interest.
Oh, well, I remain neutral as ever. I wouldn't be unhappy to see Zimbabwe get a win or two during some of these games. I think that would be quite exciting, actually. But that is me. I am neutral. Thanks, Cal. It's always great talking to you and hearing your thoughts. Thank all of you who are watching at home. We really appreciate you coming and joining us as well. So please give us a like, a subscribe to the Sporting News channel. And I'm going to plug my own piece. I got all emotional and invested in writing about Jimmy Anderson bowling.
Fair enough too.
So much so that I used Oscar Wilde, and if you want to know how I used Oscar Wilde to help me,
I'm going to be straight onto it after this.
Please, that's excellent. I'm off to Old Trafford to watch some more, and we'll chat again next week, Cal. For all of you out there, there's a lot of cricket for you to watch. So wherever you are, make sure you enjoy your cricket.
Take care, guys.